When you think about business finances, do you get an icky feeling in your tummy and think, oh, I don't really want to look at them and see what's going on? Or maybe you think, I'm just bad with numbers, or it's too overwhelming. If any of this resonates, you're going to love today's episode because I chat with a client of mine about how she went on a journey of being too scared to open her zero file to actually feeling like it could be kind of exciting to look at those numbers. No matter where you're at on your journey with money, I'm sure you're going to enjoy today's episode of the podcast where we talk about making finances fun. Have you ever panicked when you went to pay a bill that you wouldn't have enough in your business bank account? Or maybe you've received a surprise tax bill that blindsided your cash flow. Or if you've ever sat in a meeting with your accountant feeling completely lost, these aren't signs that you are bad with money. They're simply symptoms of not having the right money management system in place. Next week, we are finally kicking off the 3-day Fix Your Finances challenge. Inside the challenge, you'll learn the fatal finance mistake that a lot of business owners are making and why blindly handing everything to your accountant could cost you thousands of dollars. You'll also learn how to break your money avoidance cycle and discover the real reason why you avoid looking at your numbers. You'll learn how to become a profit leak detective and uncover the hidden money drains that are sabotaging your success. Hint, most business owners have 3 to 5 money leaks they don't even know existed. And you'll learn the 15-minute finance formula, which is the exact weekly routine that will keep you on top of your money so you never run out of cash again. The Fix Your Finances Challenge is completely free, running over 3 days, starting next Monday. So this is your last chance to jump on in and do this free live training with me. If you are ready to turn around your relationship with your business finances for once and for all, make sure you sign up via the link in the show notes for today's episode. All right, let's dive on into the episode. Well, I am so excited for today's guest. We were just saying to each other that we can talk out until the cows come home whenever we end up on calls together. But I'm delighted to have Verity, the founder of TradieWives, along on the Clare Wood podcast today. A big warm welcome to the podcast, Verity.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. And yes, we can definitely talk each other's ears off, that's for sure.
Well, first and foremost, if you could just introduce yourself to the listeners and share a little bit about what your business does and how you and I know each other.
So I started a very accidental business called TradieWives, which was born out of me sort of jumping on board with my husband, who's a landscaper. He is a very, very wonderful, creative, talented landscaper, but has no idea how to run a business. So I sort of jumped in to help him do that. He was getting pretty overwhelmed with all the stuff he was doing. He just didn't have the time to keep up with the demand, and he did have a lot of demand. So I jumped in the business to kind of take some pressure off and add a bit of value. And it went really well, and I went full time, and I realized that I didn't know a thing about business or trades. So I started a Facebook group hoping to connect with women that were doing the same thing to help me learn. And then it just kind of took off, and we've got 30,000 members in the group now, and it's turned into a business of its own where we've got a business academy where, we do monthly trainings and our own podcast, and we run events and that sort of thing now, which is really cool. So it's just very organically turned to a business of its own where I sort of identified a need for other women needing the same support that I did. And it's just been a wild ride. I feel like I've been winging it the whole time, but that's the beauty of it sometimes.
That's business in general.
It is. I think we're all winging it, aren't we? We're all doing the same thing, just hoping for the best as we go. But I've felt very lucky to connect with you, and we've had Clare on our podcast as well, which has been really cool. But I've personally worked with Clare on TradieWives because I've kind of been really learning that as I've been going, as I said. So Clare kind of came on board, which has been amazing to have you sort of help me manage the growth of the business and understand numbers and pricing, and also inviting Claire into our business academy to now do a monthly training with our members, which has been so helpful on learning how to understand your numbers, price for profit, and really, understanding what you need to be charging, and the financial knowledge to be able to set yourself up for growth, I think is really important. So yeah, it's been so wonderful to have connected you in so many different ways.
Oh, it's been awesome to be connected to you. And I know you and I just always have so much fun together. And obviously, the work that we are doing both inside the community and together has been really amazing and transformational as well.
Completely. Yeah. And just had a great time while we've done it, I think.
Yeah, lots of
Lots of
giggles along the
giggles.
way. So, what I wanted to chat to you about today is something that I know that not just people in the Trading Wives community, but a lot of business owners struggle with, which is numbers. So,
Mm.
I'm really curious to know, like, just in your own, I guess, perspective, what's the, like, you know, particularly before we started any of our work together, what's your overall thoughts? Like when you think about managing your business finances or numbers, what are the things that come up for you?
Oh, terrified, not wanting to know, ignorance is bliss kind of thing. I think obviously, like before I started with you, I was like, okay, I know that I need to know these numbers, but I just don't want to know at the same time. Like, I know there's things I need to address, but I'm also like head in the sand, don't really want to address them because then it becomes an issue. And it was almost like that, it's too overwhelming for me to know this.
Mhm.
So I just didn't, I just left it. And that's all well and good until it gets to a point where your business is suffering and you need to know that, information. And it just, I've never really liked numbers. I was terrible at maths at school. I've just never, that side of my brain just shuts down. But the beauty of, like, I think when I started working with you is kind of like, I still remember you going, well, let's just jump into your zero file. I'm like, don't really want to do that. And you're like, don't worry, I'm here to help. I remember I was like opening my zero phone, like averting my eyes. You're like, it's okay, and like I think also the knowledge that everyone's the same, you think you're the only one, but everybody's the same, everyone's a little bit nervous to look at their numbers, probably doesn't understand them as much as they should. So I think you going, don't worry, like we've been through this with other people, made me feel like, okay, like there's other people like this too. It's not just me.
And really, when we jumped in and had a look at your numbers, the story was a lot better than what you were
Than what
expecting,
I
really,
thought.
wasn't it? Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think that this is the thing, sometimes because I actively do that with a lot of my clients, I coach them through the process. I'm like, okay, let's, open up, run some reports together, work through it together. I've had some clients that we couldn't even run reports because they had three
Mm,
years of unreconciled transactions.
okay.
And whatever's going on in there, it's not going to change until you kind
Mm,
of open your eyes and have the visibility. But, sometimes we have pleasant surprises like we did with your business, and we go
yeah,
in and have a look and go, actually, do you know what?
it's
This
not
is
that bad.
actually a pretty good story, and there's a lot that we can work with and leverage here.
Mm,
Sometimes I have the opposite. I've worked with people who are like, I've got a wildly successful business making $1 million a year. When we dive into the numbers, it's actually not.
mm,
It's actually not a great news story at all. And
yeah.
I think that whatever the situation is, there's no guilt, there's no shame around it. It's just like, okay, it is what it is. How can we then start to change the story?
Mm,
And that's what the knowledge does. That's what having that empowerment around actually seeing what's going on does.
yeah, and I think as well that's exactly it. It's empowering. And I remember leaving that call and you emailing me like, just checking you're okay. Like it was a big call and blah blah blah. And I was like, no, it was actually empowering to have done something that I've been putting off for so long and understand the changes. And they were just tweaks, Some of the things were like, if you just tweak this a little bit, it's going to change your whole business. And it wasn't like,
Mhm.
it was nothing major. It was just things that we just hadn't even thought about. It's like, hey, if we change this number, then this will happen. If we change this number, then this will happen. It was like, oh, okay. Like knowledge is so empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I guess, the first part of getting into the the creating change is actually just understanding what's going on. And I
Mm,
think that this is the bit where a lot of business owners get really stuck
mm,
because they've got all these stories like they're scary. I don't want to know what's going on. I'm not good with numbers. All
mm,
of the things that you're sharing are stories that I hear again and again and again and again.
mm.
And it takes a lot of courage to face our fears. I know for me, public speaking's been a massive fear of mine. Something lately that I tackled was ice bathing. The first time I did it was just the
Oh,
most horrendous experience. And I took my masterminders on a retreat and we did it all together. And I sat there crying
oh,
but I wanted to role model to the collective, to the mastermind community. And I'm going to be like, I'm scared of things and I still
mm,
do it anyway.
mm.
And I think that this is part of the growth's edge is going, I'm scared and I don't know how this is going to play out and I'm still going to give it a shot anyway.
Completely. And you just feel so much better. I mean, we were just talking before we started recording about I went to the dentist yesterday and I've been putting that up for a very long time. But it is literally like once you do it, you go, oh, actually, it's not that bad. And you feel so much better about it.
Oh yeah. And there's actually this kind of almost I know I did my biggest speaking gig. Was that last year? Yeah, last year. And I was so anxious in the lead up to it. I barely slept the night before.
Mm.
In the lead up to it, I was thinking, I am never doing this again. I was gonna run away. I was like, if I just run away, they'll just have to get someone else to talk or
Yeah.
just skip. All these stories are coming up in my head. And
Yeah.
then after I got off and I'd done it, I was like, that felt amazing. That actually
Oh,
felt really good. And I was
yeah.
so proud of myself. And I'm like, when can I do that again?
Yeah.
It's a
Definitely.
really great feeling when you actually do conquer and get
Yeah.
past something.
Yeah.
So that was the first bit was actually sort of overcoming that fear, actually getting into the detail of it. The next part of the work that we did together was really like, okay, what are we going to do with this knowledge and information? And how are we going to leverage that? So I
Mhm.
want to talk to you about the concept of money telling of your numbers telling a story.
Yeah.
Now, we're not going to go into any of the personal details
Yep.
around your numbers, but like one of the things that I know that we uncover a lot when we look at our numbers is we go, oh, that's why that's like that.
Hmm.
Do you want to share, at a high level, any sort of ahas that you had around something that was maybe hiding in the numbers that you hadn't had the
Yeah.
courage to look at?
I think it was just all like one of the major things that came out of that I think we discovered was like so many unnecessary costs to the
Mm,
business.
yeah.
And we'd be looking at kind of like, and I remember you saying to me, this is your revenue, this is your expenses. Like, wouldn't you rather save these unnecessary expenses and have more money in the bank? Like you don't need to be paying for this. You don't need to be doing this. You can restructure this, you can restructure that. And I was like, yeah, why am I paying for that? I probably hadn't looked at what I was paying for such a long time. You know how like and you think about even like subscriptions, when you sign up to something and then you just forget about it. Like I do. I forget about it, or you go, oh, why am I still paying for that? I don't need that, but they add up. Like I looked at my subscriptions and I was like, there are so many I'm not even using. And it all adds up, and that's money that you could be putting into your pocket or back into the business or whatever you want to do with it. So I think one of the main things was like, yeah, just really looking at how can we reshuffle my expenses to have just the necessities to then in turn increase my profit.
Absolutely. And again, that's something that you only really know when you get into the nitty-gritty of the details. And something that I found, I've been in business for, gosh, 9.5 years now, is that even for me, it creeps up again. I
Mm.
know that recently I went on a bit of an AI binge. I did a training. I was feeling all excited and inspired. And I'm like, I'm going to sign up for that
Oh,
tool, and had a bit of a play around. And then I went, hang on, is this something you're actually actively going to use in your business?
mm,
If not, then you don't need to be paying for it.
mm,
But a lot of times, what happens is that actually we sign up for something, and particularly if it's not a huge amount in and of itself, But it's like, oh, whatever, it's $29 a month. Oh, that's $15 a month. And then all those little things really start to expand.
Yeah. And I think as well, like something else that you were saying to me, like I remember coming on and being like, "Oh, Claire, I think I want to hire someone new," and you're like, "You can't really afford to do that." I was like, oh, okay. And you're like, "But you could if you change this. Like if you
Yeah.
work on tweaking your numbers and just bringing in, X amount more partnerships or X amount more memberships, then you probably can afford. Or if you reduce these costs, you probably can afford it. But if you look at it as it stands, I would probably advise against it." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
And I think that this is one of the big traps, I guess, of the growth period of business. My very first client that I ever had when I started my coaching business, she had this thriving business. It was doing really, really well. She was super busy. And so she hired a full-time administrative assistant. And they were just like working like crazy, busy, busy, busy. And it was only when we sat down and actually looked at her financials, and I was like, do you realize you actually pay your admin assistant more than you pay yourself?
Mm,
And she was horrified because she hadn't actually seen the visibility around that because she hadn't been in the detail of her numbers. Now, it's not to say, that you need to get rid of that role but it's just more around like, am I aware that this is what's going on with my numbers? Because she certainly wasn't. And I know that it was a big shock to her.
mm,
And yeah, and the way that I like to teach about profit, I know that traditional accountants, like it's like cut, cut, cut.
mm,
Whereas the way that I sort of think about it, I'm like, okay, well, if you really don't want to do that, what do you need to do?
mm,
So an example of that might be, if in your home life you didn't want to get rid of your cleaner, you could say, okay, I don't want to get rid of my cleaner, but I could take on one extra client a
mm,
month, or I could bring three new people into my membership, and that will then cover that cost so that I
mm,
can keep that thing that's really important to me. Or
mm,
alternatively, you can say, do you know what? I actually don't even use that
mm,
subscription. Or I'm not even going to the office that I rented. Again, another big cost that sometimes I see that business owners
mm,
accumulate is that they end up getting a space. And some people are like, the space was everything. It completely transformed the way that I do business. It's so expansive, it's the next level. For other people, they're like, I don't even go to that space, and it's just an
mm.
extra cost that I'm paying.
Cost. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
So the second thing is that numbers tell a story. And then the third part of what I wanted to talk about was, of course, the fact that numbers, the story then gives you the power to make the decisions to do things differently. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like for tradies wives, and maybe even if there's been anything you've seen in the tradie wives community as part of our Bringing Finance Forward series.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also what I was going to say before is like when you understand, like what you said, if it's bringing a new client on that you need to do to keep someone on, or little tweaks that you need to make. I think also like knowing that you need to do that, it makes you think outside the box in terms of creative ways to sell. I think, if you're just plodding along, not knowing your numbers and getting people in, you just kind of get into a rhythm where you just, oh, that it's, this is fine, it's fine. But when you know that you need new people, you're like, all right, let's think differently. And it's like when that pressure's on you a little bit, you start thinking about like, okay, how can we creatively change things in the business to get that coming in? And I think that's really great. Like some of my best business ideas have come from like, oh my God, I need to get money in the door. How do I do that? And all the creativeness starts to come out of like almost not panic, but like a bit of an awareness that you need to increase your cash flow a little bit. So you come up with new offerings, or you go, how can I solve more things and help people? And so that's really, really like great. I think that that's really quite transformative. And I think that something that we've learned from the Tradie Wives themselves, from you doing the Bringing Finance Forward series in our business academy, is like we did a session a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about balance sheets and reports, and one of the ladies sort of said to us like, gosh, I've just been relying so much on my accountant, not myself knowing the information, but just leaving it to them and then they're coming back and going, oh, you this is this and this is this, but not really understanding what they're doing. And she's like, it's actually, and she goes, I feel like I've been taken advantage of a little bit because I don't understand what they're doing. And she's like, to know myself what's happening in the business is actually so empowering. And now when I'm talking to the accountant, like I understand more what I'm actually paying them to do. So I think that that's something really great that's come out of what we're doing is like it's really empowering the tradie wives to take back a little bit of control in the business, and arm themselves with that knowledge that they need to, it's all well and good to outsource things, but I feel like you need to understand what you're outsourcing before you outsource it. And I think you are very big on that as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think back to my corporate days. So I used to work, I was a commercial manager, which is basically like a business coach, I guess, inside a
Okay.
big corporate business.
Mhm.
And I look back now and I just think I'm so embarrassed because we used to hire these marketing agencies. We would give them so much money to do things to go and run sections of our business. And some of the things they told us, I look back now and I'm like, that was just not even true. And we were paying so much money to these
Mm,
agencies. And, having come into small business and having to learn these things myself, I think you can't just blindly outsource things and think that you need to have enough of an understanding around it. Like I'll give you one little example. Google Ads.
yeah.
When you understand a little bit about how Google Ads work, you know that, they can set up a series of words that will appear in Google Ads, and then you'll rank for them. There'll be a cost per click if people are clicking
Mhm.
through. A lot of agencies just set up the ads and just leave them. And we're like, how are they converting? They're like, excellent. This many people are clicking on it. And we'd be like, oh, fantastic. That's great.
Mm.
Not actually knowing, well, hang on, like, are you actually capturing people? Like, you're just capturing people that were actively Googling our business name.
Hmm.
What else are you capturing? And like, is that still converting? And, what's our market share in this? And are we, how are we actually actively using Google Ads? Are you changing the keywords? What keywords are we changing around? What are we ranking for? What are we not? I didn't even think to have, I was just like, Google Ads looks like there's lots of people clicking. That's great. And then now that I have a bit more of an understanding, I think how much money we were spending without even having that visibility. And I guess this is the thing with hiring an accountant as well. I mean, a lot of times people ask me, hey, can I do your course? And I don't have to have an accountant anymore.
Mm.
And I'm like, well, unfortunately, not. Like, you need to have someone who is qualified to give you tax advice and legal advice around structuring your business. But the
Mm.
difference is instead of just throwing money, you are actually asking the right questions and making sure. I can't tell you the number of horror stories I've had from clients and that I see in Facebook groups, people going, I just had an $80,000 tax bill. I feel sick to the stomach. I don't know how I'm
Mm.
going to pay it. And I'm like, my accountant never told me. And I'm like, but weren't you asking your accountant these questions? And I think that this is the thing is that people just trust that their accountant will be proactive. And my experience is that unfortunately, the majority of accountants are just like, hey, I'm just doing my job. You come to me at
Mm.
tax time. You haven't asked me about that, or you hadn't asked how you could minimize your tax, or you haven't paid me for tax minimization advice, so I haven't given
Yes.
it to you.
Yes.
And so these are the kind of things that we talk about is that I'm getting people who come through my programs or work with me one on one. I'm saying, hey, look at this stuff,
Yeah.
understand it. And then the questions you're asking are the right kind of questions. This is how you really make the extra money, save the extra money, is by knowing the right things to ask. So I love that you
Yeah.
shared that because that's, yeah.
Yeah. And I definitely think like, yeah, the tax reduction thing is massive, like, and that's, I remember going to my accountant and he said to me, like, when I changed accountants, he's like, what do you want me to do for you? Like, what services do you want me to do for you? And I was like, I don't know, just the Basson yearly tax or whatever. And he was like, oh, okay. And then luckily my accountant's one of my friends. So he knew, he could read between the lines of how much little knowledge I had. And he was very much like, I need to give you advice how to reduce your tax and how to structure things between your business and Craig, my husband's business, and how to balance that out. Because if you're not getting the right advice, you'll end up paying way more tax than you need to. Or, like even just structuring things differently throughout the year, like having that knowledge is really, really beneficial because it ends up saving you a lot of money and a lot of stress when dealing with the ATO because the ATO are not the funnest people to deal with.
And again, I think, a lot of people have got this really, we hate the tax man kind of view. And I think like one of the things that I say in the program, like for example with GST, one of the things that I say is I'm like, I want you to think that GST, or if you're listening from outside Australia, sales tax,
Mm,
think of this is not my money.
mm,
I am holding on to this for the government.
mm.
With your tax, straight away, same thing. As soon as you have a different mentality and mindset around it, it stops being such a resentful thing. You just go, okay, well, that was never my money. I'm just hanging on to it for so and so,
Mm.
hanging on to it for the tax office.
Yeah.
And so I think that, but the reason why there's so much resentment around it is because a lot of times, like people are there and they get a tax bill and they're like, what the hell? That's
Mm,
my money.
mm.
And now the evil tax man wants to take it all. And I'm like, well, it was never actually really your money. Like when you're earning profit over a certain amount, you need to contribute to our overall taxation system. And again,
Yeah.
this is why, when I teach about money and finances and things like that, I can't help but integrate mindset work into the process
Mhm.
because so much of it is all those fears, the anxieties, the yeah, and when you sort of are able to frame things a little bit differently, it helps you to go, okay, well, I know that I can just think of that money that was never really mine to begin
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have the same conversations with my husband still. And he's constantly, every time I go, okay, we own this much in tax. All I do is work to pay tax. I'm like, no, you don't. That's part of running a business. Oh, blah, 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 the ATO. I'm like, well, call them and talk to them about it, Craig. If you've got an issue, don't shoot the messenger.
And
But
it does
it's,
kind of, and I get it because it does kind of feel like that sometimes, particularly when you're in a high growth period
yeah.
and you look at the amount of money you're bringing in and you're like, oh my gosh. Like,
Yeah.
but a
Yeah.
big reframe for me, I try and always think about like, where is this tax money going?
Yeah.
What is this going towards? We are very blessed here in Australia that we have a health system, one of the best health systems in the
Mm,
world.
mm,
We have roads one of the things that I love, we were chatting before about how I've just come back from Bali. And when
mm,
you travel to other countries, you really realize the massive privilege that we have in
mm,
the developed world. Even simple things like roads.
mm.
We were driving and my kids are like, why aren't there any traffic lights here? Because we just we sat in 2 hours of traffic to get,
Yeah.
I think it was 12 kilometers.
Yeah.
The kids are like, why aren't there traffic lights? And and there's all these rickety roads with holes in them. And, there's not highways and things like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that our taxes do go to pay for. The education that we are so
Mm,
privileged to have as well. And I think that the more that you can recognize the things that our
mm.
taxes do go towards, can also help to reframe the mindset around that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that because I know that a lot of what you're sharing really, really resonates with a lot of our listeners and a lot of business owners as well. So I'm wondering if you've got any advice, if people are having a listen and thinking, oh gosh, I'll never be able to look at my numbers, I'm not interested in learning them. What would your advice be for them?
Trust me when I say if I can do it, you can. Like, I am the most ignorance is bliss kind of person when it comes to this. And honestly, if you're worried about it, like, especially talking to you, Claire, is like, you just make it so easy, And it's like something that you put off for so long and you have that conversation with you, and then it's like, oh, why didn't I do this earlier? Like I could have just saved myself 10 years of anxiety with, just having this conversation. But, I mean, you can't not know your numbers to grow. If you want to grow and scale your business, you have to know your numbers. Otherwise, you can't do, or you can try, but it's going to end up when you finally have to address that issue of the numbers, it's going to turn around and bite you because you need to understand what's going on to make better business decisions. And it's not as scary as you think. It's actually quite exciting once you get over the initial confronting moments of opening that zero file and having your eyes over it. It's exciting, and then when you see things changing for the better in the business, I remember times like we've spoken, I've come back and I've gone, oh Claire, I changed this or I did this or I did this, and it's like quite exciting to make those changes and have the business sort of, yeah, like really shift and you be able to grow. Like it is scary at first, I will say. It is quite confronting at first, but rip the band-aid off and your whole life will change.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And one of the biggest things that makes me feel really happy is when people say that I make what's, a bit scary seem a little bit easier and a little bit less overwhelming through the way that I teach it. And I think, do you know where this came from? I think it came because I didn't get it when accounting was explained to me. I
Mm.
felt like they just used a lot of big terminology and unnecessary big words. And
Mm.
so I really love to break it down into really simple ways of understanding things so that every business owner who needs to know this stuff can.
Exactly. And I think that it's, having you who explains it in a really easy to understand way. And there's no, there's no pointing fingers or anything like that. It's like, I think sometimes you worry about the numbers. And I know, like, I've had times in the past when I've seen my accountant call me and I ignore him. And then he texts me being like, Verity, answer my call. And I'm like, and yeah, it's really, it's really once you rip the band-aid off, it's it's so beneficial to you, and it's like so easy to understand, and you don't ever go, oh my gosh, I can't believe you've done this. I can't believe you've done this. Why have you spent this on this? It's like, all right, like you said before, this is the situation. How do we move forward?
Yeah.
There's no guilt or anything like that. It's like, all right, it is what it is. Like, let's move forward and make this an exciting, time for you. So that's what I love.
Oh, well, I'm pleased to hear. Now, if people are listening, I know that we're going to have some trades listening, some tradie wives listening. How can people come and be about part of your community? And can you share a little bit more about what it looks like inside the academy and inside the Facebook group?
Definitely. I think probably the best way to find us is just through the website. You can find everything on there. So that's just www.tradiewives.com.au. It's just a really the free community where you enter into is just such a supportive, lovely community. There's so many laughs in there as well as, we all talk about the crappy points of being a tradie wife and the good times, but there's also like the commiseration as well, like the, oh, we're dealing with our husband and this and this and this and this, and but it's super supportive. There's no gatekeeping information. Everyone's just so willing to share their knowledge and support, and it's really lovely. And then from that into the business academy, we have amazing people like you coming on board, professional support, and we do a lot of education in there on all areas of business and just try and solve the main pain points that we see coming through our free Facebook community. So, and that is also a really great team of people who are in there at the moment, some great business owners that I've learnt personally a lot from as well. So yeah, it's just they're just such all wonderful, supportive people. So if you are a tradie wife listening, highly recommend because it's yeah, you learn so much.
I love that. Well, what I'll do, I'll pop all of the links, including to the podcast, the website, and the Facebook group in the show notes for today's episode. Verity, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on the podcast and vulnerably sharing a little bit about your journey with money.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on, and yeah, always love a good chat with you, Claire.
Yeah. All right. I'll chat to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
If you want some help with managing your business finances and you want to make the process easy, you're going to want to check out my upcoming challenge, Fix Your Finances. This free 3-day challenge will take you through how you can get across your business finances in as little as 15 minutes a week. You can join the challenge via the link in the show notes for today's episode. 3 days of live training to help you feel more empowered with managing your money. I hope to see you inside.